Are you paying attention to what's happening in your organization, or are you understanding what it means? Because those are two very different things.
Welcome to the Climb Podcast, where we are diving into taboo topics and redefining the rules for women of color leaders. Get ready as we share the stories and amplify the voices of extraordinary women of color, from navigating workplace challenges to celebrating triumphs. On this podcast, we've got you covered. So buckle up and join us as we embark on today's empowering journey.
Welcome to the Climb Podcast, where we have honest conversation about what women of color are encountering as we navigate careers and climb into our leadership roles. I'm your host, Felicia Smith, the founder of The Climb, and today we're talking about something that we definitely don't teach enough when we talk about leadership. And I'll be honest, this topic is a bit nuanced, but I think it really is a good end to season 7 of the podcast. We have covered all different types of topics, whether we've talked about our wellness, what you do at the table, all of these things, but there's a through line that shows up in all of this. But oftentimes we don't talk about how you see the through line. So first of all, a through line is your ability to connect what appears to be separate. So you see a whole bunch of separate things. Let's say the meeting that you may have been in last month or last week, the budget decision that happened yesterday, the new executive that came on board, the project that's all of a sudden got this new attention. You're hearing your leaders talk about something over and over again. Then there's an announcement that went in. And those individual things may just seem like, things that are passing in your day to day, but together they may be telling you a story. And that is what a through line is when you put all of those things together, the story or the theme that you find that it's telling. And leaders really have to learn how to see the story. And that requires that we think more deeply, not just about the individual events, but how those come together. So let's jump into our first segment, Somebody Should Have Told Me. And in this segment, we talked about all the things we wish we knew. So someone should have told me that your job isn't just to know what's happening, but your job really is to know how it all connects. So early in our career, we are trained to think in assignments, right? Or projects. Like, what do we need to know? What's my deadline? What's my deliverable? What's the piece that I'm responsible for? And there's nothing wrong with that. Even today, if you are a person who's a technical expert that's responsible for a situation or a project, that is okay. And that's really how you learn your craft, how you establish credibility, and how you really become good at what you do. But eventually, if you want to move up in leadership, your questions have to change. So instead of only asking, what do I need to get done? You really start asking, why are we doing this? What are the organization's priorities? How does it support what I'm doing? Who else does it impact? What happens before this that may have led us here? These are all the questions of when you're trying to bring together the pieces and create the through line. So when you're asking questions like that, like, why is this happening? It really is a different way of thinking, because it's no longer about your job and your piece, but it's understanding, again, we've talked about this, how your piece fits into the larger puzzle and how it all comes together. And I don't think we talk enough about that transition. We promote great individual contributors into leadership positions, and then we suddenly expect them to understand business, to understand leadership, to understand the through line. But understand the business requires that you carry a wide lens if you're thinking about a camera. That you're not thinking of things myopically, but you're thinking about really the total picture of how something works. So I wish someone should have told me, and should tell most women of color, that your mind transitions not just from thinking about your individual piece, but how it fits in the bigger puzzle. And then also, how do all the individual things that are happening across your organization come together to create a larger picture? So let's go into Truth Is, which is our second segment. And we're going to talk about all the things that are true about the through line. So here's the truth. Nothing in an organization happens in complete isolation. Or I will say it's very, very rare, like very rare, that just one thing is happening in isolation. Most things are an amalgamation, a combination of lots of other things. So a technology decision can become a people decision. A people decision becomes a budget decision. A budget decision becomes an operational decision. And an operational decision can affect customers. And customers can eventually become a strategy problem. It is all connected. Nothing that's happening in an organization is happening in a silo, or I will say it's very rare. So imagine your organization, announces that it has a new technology platform. And if you're looking through the lens of your job, you may just think, okay, we're getting a new system. Easy enough, right? But if you're looking through the lens of the larger corporate perspective in the through line, you're asking, why is this system? Why is it now? What's the problem that as an organization we're trying to solve? Does this change how we get work done? Does this mean that certain skills are going to be more valuable than other? Are there processes that are going to change? Are there roles that are going to change? What does it mean for staffing? What does it mean for budget? What does it tell me about where the organization is going? There are so many questions. Even for that, think about that one system that you're kind of asking about how it would impact your larger organization. So now you're just not reacting to an announcement of a system, you're interpreting it. And that really becomes strategic thinking, particularly when you're trying to lead an organization or leading a team, but how you get ahead of the game, because you're thinking strategically about how just something like a technology system can impact your larger organization, and how do you prepare your team and organizations for that change. Because here's the real problem. Many high performers have been conditioned to keep their focus on their work, heads down. So we become incredibly good at seeing what's in front of us. But leadership requires those peripheral visions, looking on your sides. What's my colleagues doing to the left and right? And even your ability to be able to look forward, right? So you have to start noticing what's happening around the work. So I want to give you 5 places that you can look for the through line. So the first one is listen for repeated language. Pay attention to what leaders keep saying over and over again. So if you are repeatedly hearing efficiency, customer service, modernization, cost reduction, innovation, workforce capability, growth, I've heard all these words too much, but there aren't buzzwords, because repeated language tells you what leadership is really thinking about, right? So don't just hear those words. I want you to really ask, what behaviors and decisions are starting to follow these words? What should I be thinking about? Because that's where the through line really begins, right? Number 2, you want to follow the money. What is an organization investing in? And just as important as where the organization is investing in, the question also is, where has it stopped investing? So where we are spending money and where we are taking money away all tells you a lot about where that organization is and where it's going. Now, you guys know I'm a finance person by trade, so I'm probably biased, but I will tell you that budget tells a story. If leadership says something is a priority, but consistently doesn't fund it, I want you to pay attention. If a new initiative suddenly receives a lot of resources, pay attention to that. Money often tells you what matters before the official announcement does. And that's a bar right there. Follow the money, and it will tell you the priorities of that organization, where it's trying to head, what it's trying to do. Follow the budget. Number 3, watch what gains and loses attention. Organizations communicates priorities through attention. So what suddenly has executive sponsorship? What's appearing on every meeting agenda? What project that used to be important is barely being discussed anymore? Sometimes what leadership stops talking about is just as important about what they're talking about. It also tells you where they're focused and what they're thinking about. And that's a part of being able to see that through line. Number 4, look across functions, okay? So this is a big one. You cannot develop an enterprise perspective if your only understanding is of your own department. I've had people say this, well, I just want to do this one thing. So if you're in HR, you need to understand what's happening in operations. If you're in operations, you need to understand the customer. If you're in technology, you need to understand business strategy. If you're in finance, you need to understand the people implications of the decisions being made, because senior leaders have to think across boundaries. Again, if we use that technology example, there were so many questions that crossed the boundaries of just operations or just finance or just HR. And the ability as a leader for you to put that together is key. So you have to start asking, if we make this decision over here, then what happens over here? That's where strategic thinking really starts getting stronger. And I hope you guys are vibing the way I'm vibing about this. I geek out a little bit on like strategic thinking and putting pieces together, maybe because I just like puzzle pieces. Who knows? And then our final, number 5, is connect what's happening now to what happened before. Connect what's happening now to what has happened before. I have said this season, and I will say it again. Organizations have a memory. Maybe 6 months ago, a new executive came in. 3 months later, leadership started talking about efficiency. Then there was a review of certain programs. Now you're hearing conversations about restructuring. Those may have not been 4 separate events, right? They may have been one story unfolding over time. So that's why context matters. Context is so important. You have to remember what happened before so you can better understand what you're seeing now. And let me stop and let me pet peeve. This is a part of why leadership is important and why we can't take the model of social media, right? Because you see a clip and you like, oh, I know the whole story, but you have missed what's happened before and what's happened after in a conversation, what happened at the beginning and then what's happening after, because then you can get a better picture and can see what's going on. That is my biggest pet peeve right now, is people just taking a clip and running with it. I need us to do a little bit more. Anywho, I digress. Those are my 5 things. So let's talk about the leadership shift. And here's where this gets really important, because seeing the through line isn't just about understanding what's happening. Eventually, it helps you to anticipate what's coming, right? So that is completely different levels of leadership. And I've had some amazing leaders who have poured into me time to try to teach me this concept, right? You stop waiting for someone to tell you what to do next, because you're beginning to understand what the organization is likely to need. Okay, you hear leadership talking about a new strategic priority and you start thinking, if we're going to be there, what capability am I going to need? What can I bring to the table? What can I help shift? What problems is it going to create? Who needs to be involved? What should my team start preparing for? And that's when you stop being someone who simply responds well and you become someone who can anticipate and plan. A leader who can anticipate becomes incredibly valuable. So we talk about valuable and being visible and all those things, but your ability to be able to be forward leaning and forward thinking makes you incredibly valuable, because it is rare. And it's interesting that I say it's rare, but you'd be surprised how many leaders have not practiced that muscle. And it is a muscle that you have to practice. So let's go to our final segment, another Rung Mended. And we're going to make this very practical. So this week, I want you to start practicing what I call the through line exercise. Okay. So choose one major thing that's happening in your organization right now. We always have one. Maybe it's a new leader. Maybe it's a new strategic plan, a technology implementation, a budget reduction or increase, a hiring push, a new customer strategy. Listen, you pick it. Whatever it is, I want you to write it down. Then I want you to ask these questions. What happened before this? What decisions, problems, leadership changes, or conversations may have led us here? What organization priorities does this connect to? Why does this matter to the larger business? What else does this affect? Look beyond your department. What patterns am I noticing? So what language, investments, or decisions keep showing up? And then finally, if this continues, what may happen next? So this is not about being right. It's really about training yourself to think beyond the immediate of what's in front of you and really thinking forward, because that's how you begin to develop an enterprise mindset. And again, that is what makes you invaluable. So before we close, I want you to think about this. Are you paying attention to what's happening in your organization, or are you understanding what it means? So I'll say that again. Are you paying attention to what's happening in your organization, or are you understanding what it means? Because those are two very different things. You can attend every meeting, read every email, know every initiative, and still miss the through line. I see people do it all the time. Information alone does not make you strategic. Being a senior leader doesn't just make you strategic. It is your ability to connect that information to understand the through line. That is what makes you strategic. The higher you climb, the more important it becomes for you to see beyond your own work. You have to understand the people. You have to understand the organization. You have to understand how priorities, decisions, resources, strategies, all that comes together and connects. Because leadership does not see what's happening today. They understand how today connects to yesterday and what it may mean for tomorrow. So this week, do not ask the question, what's happening? I want you to really ask the question, what's the through line? Because leadership requires you to stop seeing events and start seeing patterns. That is the pod. And not only is that the pod, that is the end to season 7 of the podcast. Woo! That's 10 episodes. We're going to go on a little break for a couple weeks and then we'll be back. But this is an episode you'll probably have to listen to a couple times to really understand the concept of the through line. But if this episode made you think differently about your organization, I want you to send it to another woman who's ready to strengthen the way that she thinks and leads. But until next time, keep climbing. And remember, we are not just climbing careers, we are building ladders. Thank you for joining me on season 7, and I look forward to us having an amazing time in season 8.
Thanks for tuning into the Climb Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on wherever you listen to podcasts. For updates and behind-the-scenes content, make sure you're following us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Join the Climb. Until next time, keep climbing and keep thriving, sis. See you next episode.